감사합니다. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Welcome to July edition of the Embassy Speakers Series. Before we begin, I would like to welcome the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Canada, His Excellency Cho Hee-yong, to provide the welcoming remarks.
Good evening. Good evening, esteemed Michelle Valberg, and fellow ambassadors and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining today's Embassy Speaker Series. I think that I should make my speech short because all participants seem to be very, very exciting to listen that the Ms. Valberg's today's special speech to you. As you all know, that this year is a very special year for both countries. This year is the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between our two countries, and the 60th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice. To celebrate this double milestone, our embassy has continued to host the speaker series to share the insights and perspectives of some of the Canada's most prominent dignitaries to explore more opportunities and constructive avenues for mutual cooperation and common grounds in the future. So today, I'm very happy, I'm very pleased to host the fifth event in this meaningful series. Today, as you know, today's topic is the Arctic Kaleidoscope, the people, the wildlife, and ever-changing landscape. This topic is, I think, is both timely and relevant in light of Canada's assumption of the chairmanship of Arctic Council and Korea's recent attainment of permanent observer status of the Arctic Council. So since Korea has become an ad hoc observer, a member of Arctic Council, Korea has continuously participated in research activities and also other activities, including the joint research on climate change and other very important projects with other member countries. Korea is really proud to have become the permanent observer of the Arctic Council. So we are going to continue to do our job and to further collaborate with member countries. And also we continue to do our the possible role in advancing, in achieving the key goals of the Arctic Council, namely the sustainable development and also environmental protection in the Arctic region. And so today we are very happy to have the award, so many awards winning, Michelle Valberg here with us.
to where the Arctic Bay, the flow edge, where they broke off just last week. And I was fortunate enough to be a photographer for a very wealthy family that wanted the ultimate Arctic experience. And I was their celebrity photographer, and I said, you can call me whatever you want to call me, I'll be whatever you want to be. I was able to have this most incredible experience traveling with this family. And we traveled by Twin Otter. We landed, actually, this is in the Twin Otter, we were landing at our campsite. And those bergs up there on the left side, that was what we looked at every morning when we walked out of our campsite. It was pretty remarkable. And very fortunate for me because I was able to fly around in helicopters and Twin Otters and be able to see the Arctic in a way I never imagined, never dreamed, but also in a way that so few people ever get a chance to do. I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world when I talk about my experiences. So part of the family, what they wanted, they had me, they had a chef, they had a master diver, and they also brought up a hot air balloon. So the pilot is from Ottawa. His name is John Davidson, and we waited 12 days for this photo. It was, we had terrible weather throughout the time that we were there. The gusts of wind went up to 60, 70 kilometers an hour. So you can imagine sleeping on the ice in tents in polar bear country with wind and a tent right against your head. But this was a shot that was well worth the wait, and I was thrilled to see that he actually flew through the bergs. He was launching off here, and he told me he knew that the direction of the wind would take him around the bergs, and he said, would you like me to fly through them? And I said, that would be great. And he did. The Citizen reporter asked me why I chose this photo, because I was able to photograph the whole experience, and he came down and he almost touched on the top of the berg. And I have all these photos of this beautiful, it happened so slowly, and all this experience and going around and ending over there. And he said, well, why did you pick this shot? And I said, because it's a balloon between two icebergs. I don't think that there's too many photos like this around in the world. And it also landed in Nat Geo, so I was pretty happy about that. So this kind of gives you an idea about what it's like on the flow edge and what it looks like, or I hope it does anyway. When we went up the second time, I was quite disappointed because when we went out to the flow edge, the ice had gone out, it had broken off and came back in, and the wind brought it with such force that there were pieces of ice. This is what we saw all along the ice floe, and I thought, oh my goodness, we're not going to see anything. We're not going to have any experiences. We're not going to see any whales. We're not even going to know when a polar bear is going to be coming around. And our guide tootled us along, and we were along the flow edge, and then he stopped. And then quietly, all of a sudden, we heard this, and it was the sound of the whale. And what had happened is in these, all this ice formation, it created pools. So we had pools in front of us that drew in narwhal and beluga, sometimes 30, 40, 50 at a time. And they would come in and you would see their experience, their behavior, and you'd see the feeding and you tried to understand what they were going to do next. As a photographer, it's quite difficult to photograph whales. Even though you had so many right in front of you, you weren't quite sure what to expect, where they were going to come up, and there were tusks, and this is what I went back for. There were tusks and lots of them, and there were babies. So it was pretty intense for photographers. For about 45 minutes, you had all this action in front of you, trying to anticipate, and then all of a sudden they would go away. And then you would have a break, and you'd be able to breathe a little bit, and you're like, okay, good. And then all of a sudden you'd hear a sound of a whale, and then all of a sudden another 30, 40 beluga and narwhal were right in front of you again. They're going underneath you, and they're right there, like they're right there. Imagine how lucky. So again, like I said, trying to experience, or trying to anticipate what they were going to do next. And sometimes there was so much action you didn't even know where to point, to aim. You just hoped that you were able to capture whatever you could in the time that they were there. And this I love. I didn't take this photo. A friend of mine did. He was in the water, and I quite enjoy looking at this photo just because you can imagine what the whales are thinking when they're looking at us. Like, really? Really? So one of the biggest thrills of my life is actually getting in the water with a narwhal. Again, remember 5 years ago I had not even photographed a polar bear. I'm a city girl. Camping isn't exactly on the top of my list of things that I want to do on a regular basis. I will do it up there. I've seen somehow down here it's just not the same. But I saw these guys getting in the water, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get out of that comfort zone. I'm going to do something I never in a million years ever thought I would do, and try to experience. And at this point, I didn't even know if I would be able to take a photo. I was getting in ocean water. I had my friend stay with me until I knew. I had never been in a dry suit before. I wasn't quite sure. I'm a good swimmer, but I wasn't quite sure how my body was going to react, how it was going to feel. And I dipped in, and of course it was natural to me. And I put my head under the water, and I just came up and I said, I didn't see anything. I'm just looking in water, and this is the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. However, though, all those whales that I was talking about, those 40, 50, well, when I got in the water, they all left. So I was bound and determined. I was not going to get out of the water until I knew I had experienced this. Hopefully my body would allow me to do so. I was with all males, and they were on the edge. They were all watching me, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this. And I was getting colder and colder and colder because my hands were wet and my head was wet. I had my long underwear and my fleece and everything on underneath my dry suit, so my body was okay. But all of a sudden, this cold started to seep through my body. I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to get out. I'll come back in. And then my guide said, Michelle, whale. And I looked again. I went, okay, here I go again. I put my head under, and this whale came screeching right underneath me. And he stopped about 4 feet, and he turned upside down, and he stared at me, and then he went off. And then I turned back. Usually when there's one, there's more. And I was able to see 6 more come and glide right underneath me. And some were small, some were big, some had tusks. And I was speechless. I got out of the water. I couldn't even, my hands were so cold, I couldn't even get my hat off. And I just stood there in total awe of what I had been able to experience. Unfortunately, I thought I would get back in, but unfortunately the weather turns. And of course in the Arctic, you're at the mercy of the weather and what it will bring you. So hopefully in August this year, the end of August, I'll be able to get back in and swim with the narwhal and the bowhead. That's really something that I never thought that I would say. Of course, like I said, I've had some close encounters with polar bears, and Leanne, my friend, and I had gone up to Armistice, Nunavut, and we had been invited to go spend some time in cabins on the Hudson Bay coast, right on the direct migration path of the polar bear. And Leanne had always wanted to come with me to the Arctic, and I told her I had this opportunity, and she jumped at the chance. Little did she know that we'd have a close encounter with a polar bear within 4 minutes of landing. And we had taken the twin otter. We landed on the tundra, which was an experience in itself. And before we knew it, the bear that we had seen on the coastline was approaching. And Leanne was screaming, bear. And I was screaming, lens. The guys were unpacking the plane, and Leanne just kept saying, there's a bear, there's a bear, there's a bear, never having seen a polar bear. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, this bear approached us. And before I knew it, I was standing behind the guide and realizing how close the bear was actually to us. And at this point, I looked over to find where Leanne was. She was in a doorway. She was in the doorway with the pilot. And I'm standing there realizing that I'm behind this guide who's 20 feet from this bear. And I did not know what I was going to do, but I just knew that I couldn't obviously run. I had to stay put. And then the bear sat down, and I hear Leanne go, oh. You know, the big fat bear sits down, big cute thing. Well, the guide is talking from the side of his mouth saying, Michelle, the bear's going to charge. He's in a charge stance. Are you good if I fire a ground shot? Like, yeah, go do whatever you have to do. Do whatever you have to do. And he unfortunately did have to fire the ground shot. Obviously, you don't want to ever have to do that. But at this point, this bear was fully intending on coming to us and charging us. So it was within the first 4 minutes of this trip, and it was the most intense time that I've had in polar bear country, and Leanne hasn't been back with me yet either. I think she'll come. So this is after he fired the ground shot, and the bear, he was kind of surprising that he didn't run off any faster. He was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'll leave you alone for now. But we slept in these cabins, and we had polar bears around us for the whole time. And fortunately, like I said, I talk about my guides quite a bit. Very, very good idea to always travel with a guide when you're out on the land. And I've been able to travel with some pretty incredible guides. And they're not only good guides, but they're great photo opportunities. They're very photogenic, let's just say. This was Joe Abbey, and after spending some time out with me on the land looking for walrus, it doesn't always come. Like I said, you're not always so fortunate to see animals when you think you're going to see them. And we had traveled out, it was about -40, and we were in this Comatic, and I was pretty cold. He had to dress me in his caribou outfits and make sure that I was kept warm because I just didn't have enough clothes on. And when we got back, I asked him if I could photograph him in his traditional hunting attire. And he went and he put on his beautiful wolf coat, and he came out, and he was quite used to being photographed. So he was standing there doing all these poses for me. This is really easy. And then he would point, and he would do all this, and I was like, wow, this is great. So then near the end, I said, this is great, a nice close-up of him, and then he reached out, and he went like this, and he went down, and he threw snow up in his face. And it ended up being, I should show the before and after, because before was fine, but the snow around his face and on his face and around the collar just made the photo even more special. Very, very fun. And of course the children and the faces that you see. When I go into the communities, they're very welcoming, as many of you who have been there know. I always ask permission to photograph the people. And this little boy just had that beautiful glance when he looked at me, and again, I only had a second. I fired it off, and it ended up being a cover shot for Above and Beyond magazine. And following the sounds of the children, there's majority of the communities are children. They got a 55,000 Inuit. 50% of them are under the age of 20. I'm not quite sure of the numbers anymore. My mind's not working that well these days with that, but it's full of children and laughter and being able to see them in their environment. Of course, playing hockey whenever they can, even on a frozen pond. Being able to photograph the elders and to be able to go into their homes and hear about their life on the land as nomadic people. It wasn't that long ago that they lived as nomadic people and followed the animals. And it's incredible to be able to hear their stories. And sometimes they're not even believable. But they're very, like I said, welcoming and willing to share with us their stories. And when you look at a face like this, you know that there's been a lot of life lived in so many ways. And of course, like I said, with wildlife, you have lots of opportunity, but you also have a lot of photos that you have to take in order to get that shot. And thank goodness for digital, let's just say. This is a baby narwhal, and I'm this is one of my favorite photos just because I got a baby narwhal coming out of the water straight at me and in focus, and his eyes out of the water. They move fast like you wouldn't believe, but it's one of my favorite photos just because I was able to capture that. And of course, caribou, sometimes, well, this trip, like I said, the snow is what you expect. On this trip, we went to see 400,000 caribou migrate, and we only got to see a couple hundred. But of course, the couple hundred that we did see were pretty special in regardless of not we expected to be within the herd. It didn't quite work out that way, but they were indeed fun to photograph. And when you're not photographing the large animals, sometimes it's fun to photograph the little guys. This is a siksik. It's an Arctic ground squirrel, and the hare and the fox. And sometimes we would be standing right beside a rock on the tundra, and we have no idea that the animal's right there, and until it moves. We did that a couple of times. We had no idea that there was a hare right beside us until we went to move and it moved. So they're always fun to photograph as well. And of course, birds. Birds are a big part of what I love to photograph, and I was absolutely thrilled. These are king eiders, and I had seen them, but I had never photographed them that close. And my guide again told me, Michelle, birds, they're always looking after you and knowing what you like to photograph. And as soon as I started shooting, of course, the beautiful light, it makes it look almost surreal. And I just started screaming, "They're king eiders!" and lucky for me, my king eiders get to fly all across the Arctic in a plane, or on a plane. This is the first airplane, and I was thrilled last year when I found out that it would grace the tail. So it's mostly in the Western Arctic, so if you're ever flying around the Western Arctic and you see king eiders on a plane tail, they're mine. One of the things about this photo that I love to show, again, it was a moment, the bear was fortunately not running towards us, it was running away from us. It was a fast action, not very much time to think. The bear was moving quite quickly, and I fired off probably 7, 8 shots. And it wasn't until I looked at the back of my camera that I realized this is an Arctic mirage. That whole, I'm like, who knew? I didn't even see it when I was photographing, and I only saw it on the back of my camera when I looked at my images. And out of, say, the 7 or 8 photos that I photographed, only 3 of them had the Arctic mirage in it. Pretty remarkable. Of course, when I photograph polar bears, whether it's a walrus or the muskox, it's always wonderful to have a beautiful portrait of an animal, but it's another to show the animal in their environment and maybe capturing some sort of sense of their environment, them in the environment, something that tells a story. So I'm always in search of, I'll go after that beautiful portrait, but then I always try to find something else that I can photograph that animal doing or being, and try to create an experience that maybe you haven't seen before. And sometimes you're very lucky when an animal will behave for you. And this was a very warm day in Arviat. It was about 25 degrees, and this bear was really, really hot. And he was just trying to dig himself into this sand hole in hopes to get cooled off. And he was just punkered out, like he didn't care about us whatsoever. He was just looking, he was digging, and then finally he just plopped himself down. So it's always nice when they behave for you like that. Or else gathering I think this is one of my fun favorite photos, and it can always put a smile on your face, especially when you're mad at somebody. And this is our yoga bear. Leanne and I saw him, we spent some time. And one of the fun things is when I hear people and what they think the animal is doing or saying. I love to hear that, and a couple of comments have been, how do you like my manicure? Can you imagine what they're doing? And we had certainly a lot of fun watching this guy in his environment. This was the Wapusk trip that I did a couple of months ago, and talk about privilege. There's so few people in this world that are able to experience this, and I was lucky enough to be the leader of a small group, and we went out, and it's the only known denning area of polar bears that you can actually visit and see. And you're able to, over a 5-week period of time, see the bears newly emerged from their dens with their cubs. And again, last year I had a friend photographer go, and he didn't see one family. For us, we were very lucky. We saw a family every day. We actually saw 4 families we were able to spend time with, and every day we would just go out in minus 55. It never got really warmer than minus 30, and you spent the day watching the bears and their behavior and in their environment, and it was beautiful. It was an experience that will always be very, very special to me, and being able to watch these bears, truly I think all of us, we just want to be loved and nurtured and taken care of, and to watch this so up close and personal, and to be able to see these bears react with the mother, how they don't leave their side at all. We did have a cub pair that did leave the mother because they were a little older. She was a little wounded, so she was late leaving, so the bears were a little bit older. It was pretty intimidating, let me just say, on the first day when the bear, she got up. We had been watching her for about an hour, and she got up, and it was the whole behavior. She got up, she sniffed the air, and then she went down on her belly, and she did some rubbing, and then she got up, and she just directly walked towards us. And that's when my fingers froze. We had been out for most of the day, and I was on my camera the whole time, obviously. I couldn't believe that she was getting closer and closer. This is full frame, so I had a 600 mil on, and she was approaching us, and our guides were on it. They understand the behavior. They knew what the animals were doing by what she was doing when she sniffed and rubbed her belly. And they got the skidoos ready and just kind of guided them away and just went in front of us just to make sure. She had every intention in coming directly to us. Talk about scary, especially when the babies were walking away from her. And again, this is full frame. So the whole time you're going, no, 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 go back, go back, go back, go back, go back, go back to mom, go back to mom. Don't come any closer, don't come any closer. And they were very, very curious about us. And fortunately, they didn't come any closer, and nothing had to happen in any way that would have harmed the animals, which is, of course, your first and your foremost impression. You don't want to have anything happen that you will regret, or you don't want to harm the animals in any way. And again, like I said, at the end of this trip, I spent 5 days out photographing them and experiencing that behavior. And I'm looking at it differently because I'm looking at it through a pretty close-up lens. So I have my own little TV going. I have my own little experience that nobody else had. They all had their own, but my experience was just me and them, and watching them. And watching Mom try to feed her babies. One of them was having difficulty latching, I guess, and she just kept guiding them in. And it really became, at that point, more, it wasn't about the photography anymore. It was about the relationship and the beauty of what we were able to experience. And enough that she got up after the day and walked right to us, and walked not directly to us, but in front of us. And she walked off, and we watched as the wind whipped the snow up, and she walked off into the distance, and I broke down in tears. I cried for half an hour. I know it sounds maybe kind of crazy, but the experience was just so much more than a photographic opportunity, and something that I feel so incredibly fortunate to have had and to bring back to show all of you. Of course, with all the landscape and the people, you have all the wildlife and the people, you have the majestic, beautiful, incredible landscapes that can take your breath away. This is actually Labrador. It's the Torngat Mountains. I was lucky enough to fly over the fjords and towering cliffs and beautiful, crystal clear blue. You could see all the Arctic char when you flew over the lakes beneath you. It's so clear. And people lived here. Sometimes you would come across these sites, you come across some graveyards as well, and you try to imagine, how can you live in this climate, and how can you live so desolate and away from any kind of civilization? And they're amazing people, and they're absolutely amazing people. And whether it's sunny or if it's cloudy, obviously with the clouds you can create some more beautiful dramatic images. Obviously with sunshine you have a whole different perspective. But no matter what I have, I try to make the best of it, because I know the likelihood of being back in that situation would be very remote. So I try to do what I can. This was a trip with Dennis up to Pond Inlet, the hoodoos, and try to use light and the formations, the texture of the rocks, what you have before you. I'm always trying to find ways of creating images that you may not have seen before. Of course, like I said, with icebergs, every single one of them are like a piece of art, and I will never get tired of photographing icebergs, especially when you have this magical light that appears. This is a bird rock, and there's 150,000 birds, kittiwakes and murres and fulmars, and it was deafening, the sound that these birds made when they all flew off the rock at the same time. And you certainly didn't want to look up too often. And you know, one of the things about this bird rock is that you're able to walk into it. So many bird rocks that I've been to, you drive up to it and you look down, or you drive up to it in a ship and you look up at it. Because we were on the frozen ocean, we were able to walk into it. Our guide had to go in and make sure there were no polar bears hanging around on the inside. But when I walked in, I saw this faint green, and I was intrigued because I saw color where I didn't expect it. So I adjusted my camera, and again, it was not until I looked at the back of my camera that I really saw the color. I didn't see that with my eyes, but my camera fortunately created it for me. And one of my great, I think, abstract photos in my library that I truly love. And of course the Northern Lights. The Northern Lights, everybody who has experienced Northern Lights know and can feel them, can see them, can hear them. Sometimes they feel like they're just right above you and that you can reach up and touch them if you're lucky enough. This is a photo I did of my son, and I love showing this because I made a 7-year-old stand still for 15 seconds. But being able to show my son and my husband the beauty of the Arctic and my love and my passion, very lucky for me because they understand a little bit better why I'm so attracted to the Arctic, and they likewise share love and hope to go back many times with me in the future. This was up just in Wapusk, so when the one day we didn't see bears in Wapusk National Park, we were greeted by Northern Lights, so it was a really good compromise in my mind. So of course I'm nearing the end with my landscapes, but one of the things that I love to do is every time I get on a plane I always have my camera, and I love looking down at the textures and the lines and the details and the patterns that are created, and I forever have fun trying to find a way to photograph from sometimes very dirty windows. You don't always have the option of where you sit, and trying to find a way that coming back and showing the Arctic again in a way that maybe you haven't seen before. And textures and lines, and this is a nice a glacier that's going into the water up in Greenland. Another very, very beautiful place. If you've never been to Greenland, it's just absolutely extraordinary. And one of the things that I love about the aerials is it just gives you a completely different perspective of looking at this iceberg from above, when you know that it's probably the size of Nepean, and you're able to see it at a different, in relation to the land and the water, and seeing it from a different level is always interesting. This is the Greenland Glacier, and I was asked to go in the helicopter. Sure, I'll go. Flying over and seeing this glacier that's 1.5 kilometers high at the end of the glacier. 1.5 kilometers. How do you translate that? How do you show that? And it goes forever and ever. How do you bring that back and show it? This is with a wide-angle lens, and I wasn't even able to get a very, very small portion of this incredible glacier. So I'm going to end with my little story about Project North. The ambassador mentioned this not-for-profit organization that I co-founded 4 years ago, and Sheldon Rice is here from my committee. And we started with an idea of bringing up hockey equipment to the Nunavut communities. And one of the things, when you go into the community, you go into the grocery store, say, you can go and find a 2-liter carton of milk that costs $18. So you can imagine that hockey equipment isn't exactly something that people can afford up there. But they have recreational centers. So a lot of them have the centers that they're able to play hockey, but a lot of them don't play hockey because they don't have hockey equipment. Hockey is a big, big, big sport up in the Arctic. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I guess there's too many Montreal fans and Toronto fans. We have to work on the Sen fan base up there. But it was an idea to bring up hockey equipment.